Poverty can be cruel. Poverty can be an indicator of how your worries multiply in your head and you feel with questions that clutter your mind. Like, it's so difficult nowadays. My job pays me nothing. When the real question should be that how people who struggle and who are financially not stable, who are downtrodden, how can somebody who is in a good position can help that person? Now that's a question, that's a very serious question and a very delicate question to ask from oneself and from the society that we live in. But Jesmyn Ward asks those brutal questions from the point of view of a black community living in Mississippi in the 80s, 90s and 2000. Now the book that I'm talking about is, well, before that, my name is Nagendra Bisht and I'm a YouTuber and I come up with videos which are about books, their reviews, how-to tutorials and how you can make sure that you fall in love with book reading. And that's the job, that's a goal that I have in mind. In fact, that's the mission that I have in mind. And today I've come up with a gripping tale of black community story from someone within the community. It's a memoir and it's a wonderful book by Jesmyn Ward, Men We Reaped. Now, this is not a new book. It's about 8 years now that since this book has been published, and I did not know about it. I just kind of looked at Instagram and I found, and social media of course, I looked at one of the reviews and found this book to be an interesting read. Picked it up from Amazon, bought it from Amazon, ordered online, and somehow the moment I started reading this book, it was a wonderful read. Usually my routine is that I start reading my book, it takes about 10 to 15 pages before the story sinks in my head and I'm able to read further, because initially you're just getting used to the rhythms of the story, just like any other thing that you do. And similarly, I was hoping that this thing will happen with me in this book. But let me tell you, before I could end about 8 to 10 pages, I was already sucked into the story. And I'll tell you why. Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward, the writer, is a memoir of the life that she led in 80s, 90s and 2000 in DeLisle, Mississippi, of the men she lost during those times, and of her hood, as she calls her neighborhood, that will chill your bones like an overpowering cold that will stretch for months, and in her case, generations. She sketches a picture which is so vivid, so overpowering, and so heartbreaking and full of nostalgia that your heart will ache at the right and the wrong places all at the same time. And I must tell you, this book is unputdownable from the moment I read the first paragraph. I mean, it took me time, but as I got the grips of the story, it was unputdownable. The plot. So the story is non-linear. It is set in two timelines. The first timeline talks about the story or the history of her family from the time her parents were young to the time she grew up as a teenager and went to the college. And in another timeline, she is giving out small details or the life sketches of the men she lost, the men who died in her neighborhood. Some were brothers, cousins. And in the last chapter, she talks about, in the penultimate chapter, she talks about the death and painful memory of a brother, Joshua, and that is where the two timelines meet. Through the lives of these four men and their death, Jesmyn Ward questions the endemic poverty, helplessness, and a feeling of being forgotten in the black community. They are given lowly jobs, looked with suspicion and bias, without any room for their rehabilitation or looking into what's wrong with them. Now it seems like black communities' concerns are non-existent in DeLisle, Mississippi, where she lives. And it's so alarming and so disconcerting for somebody like me who lives in an entirely different world. I mean, if you are living a life of less, and if you're consigned to being non-human, it is difficult to understand or wrap your head around that feeling. When your perpetrator is pushing you to the brink and asking you questions every day. Now, it is a kind of a hatred which is so in your face. It appears to have become normal to its perpetrator, and the oppressed, meek and numb with the action against them. Jesmyn Ward has referred to them as an unknown invisible force which is killing their community, which is killing all the black men living with her. And she is concerned, she feels as if she has failed those men. And you will figure out this them. You will figure out who she's referring to as them once you read the novel. In one of the scenes, the writer is studying in an all-white private school with the financial help of her mother's employer, where she's working as a maid. In one of the scenes, her senior barges into the class where she's studying, sits next to her and starts cracking nigger jokes to pin her down as if she's an animal who needs to be domesticated, like a nobody. It is akin to a feeling of being crushed by a powerful hand of an opponent. The memory alive in you long after the hand has left your body. The writer feels oppressed, crushed, and a feeling which is beyond explanation. And with each word that this writer has written in the book, you feel the pain and the misery and the agony of being a black in a community, in a society where there's no hope for them. In one of the scenes, she looks at a ditch which she somehow discovers with her siblings, her brother and sister. In fact, her brother takes her there, and she's looking at this man-made ditch which is dark and filled with leaves and all sorts of stuff, which you will get to know when you read the book. And she compares that ditch, the darkness of that ditch, to her life, to her black community life, which has no hope, because she knows it and they feel it. She is bullied by her own girlmates, her own classmates, girlmates. One of the girlmates says to her, "Why don't you tie those nigger braids on my hair?" And when she asks her to repeat, probably she's mistaken, she says the same thing to her. It is so common, it's so prevalent, and the whites or the non-blacks don't really care about their feelings at all. Such is the extent of mental disintegration of black community, as explained by the writer, that the black men or the black people are bound to die, looking down at a deep, dark ditch without any hope of survival, like the one she discovered in the backyard with her siblings. Men we reaped is as real as an open wound, not allowed to heal. It's damaged tissues, scarring your memories beyond repair. It's not like that white people have it easy, but it's just that in black community, black and easy do not go hand in hand. And if your skin color is black, then all those opportunities that should have been for the taking are never given, entertained, or acknowledged. Black men of the 90s died in their school before they were killed on the streets, their front yards, on the railway lines, and in lonely dark rooms. I've given you a hint, and you will get to know when you read the book. Black men and their struggle with drugs is so endemic that it never leaves you, like a warm, bright light on a sunny afternoon. It's a heart-numbing story of the black community and how her mother, her black mother, raises her and her 5 siblings without the support from their father. It is also a close inquiry into the lives of the families and what is expected of black men and black women in DeLisle, Mississippi, with their limited resources and plentiful neglect and ruin. Now, because Jesmyn Ward, the writer of this memoir, has lived the life to tell us in the form of a book, in the form of a memoir, it seems like her loss is not only personal, but alive and palpable in her words, in her powerful writing. Now, I picked this book not knowing how much it will move me, but the moment I got sucked into the story, into the lives of these black communities, I cried. And I cried many times during the reading of the book. And in some of the scenes, I felt my inner voice telling me that we as humans do injustices to our brothers, to people who are human just like us, and who should have been given the opportunity to live as equal. Just like the nature gives us the opportunity to take birth with two eyes, one nose, a similar body structure, then why do we have so much of injustice and inequality once we are born in the society? Men we reaped and the black men that live in it eventually, at some point in time, were young children, toddlers, who were living life with the full force of nature, just the way anyone would live it. But as they grow old and as they get into the system of getting on with life, it becomes such a struggle for them. With plentiful neglect in school, the system is such a place to be, a school is such a place to be, that if you're not talented and if you do not have enough brain or enough capabilities, there's no one to look at it. There's no one to cultivate it within you. And the black community in itself is so poor that there will hardly be any money pouring in from your family to help you come out of that misery. I'm not sure this review is able to capture the grief or the feeling that should be conveyed through this review, but I definitely urge you all to read this book by a fine writer who has shaped my thought now, that I should look into the subtle indications, the life of people who are downtrodden, who are pushed to their limits to lead a normal life, and that they're not given by the society that they live in. And I should extend a hand of help to that person. Jesmyn Ward, the writer, writes with flair and authority. Her words are tinged with pain, but her skills are on full display with the colors of South, which is mostly dark and humid, but full of laughter of a young family, of her siblings who live a life of fun and enjoyment throughout their teenage life. She goes to length to discuss her family life, which is so beautiful and lively that it takes your breath away. When together, her four siblings and Jesmyn, Shireen, Nerissa, Joshua, and Jesmyn, who's called Mimi lovingly, are a riot when they're together. And her writing lights up their togetherness like the laughter of a newborn baby. Along with these men and their life and their deaths, Jesmyn Ward also talks about the women of the South, their poverty, their neglect, and along with it, their worries of the men that they believe would be sitting together for a dinner, for a wonderful time on one night, and will be dead the next. She's not sure what's going to happen to her or to her young men that are living after her. So she carries on with this thought, with the legacy of her mother, and presents to us a story that is so heartbreaking, but is full of hope also in the fact that we as a society can bring in that change. And I really hope that with this novel, with this memoir, it's just not a tale that will make us cry, make us weep, and show us the injustices in the society, but will also give us a hope and believe that we can definitely, by looking at these lives, take lessons, take a thought from this book that should make a change for a better. I really want you to read this book. This is a wonderful book, and I really loved it. I really like this book. I will reread it because I feel that it's not enough to just give it one reading. It's one of those books, and I hope you really like this review. I know it's a bit sad, or it's a gloomy tale. It's a tale about men who died, but as I said to you, it's also a lesson. So if you like this review, guys, do share this with your friends who like these kind of novels, these kind of fiction books. Like it if you like this review, subscribe to my channel, and keep watching book reviews and how-to tutorials and reviews of these kind of books. Thank you so much.